Cable guy!
Anyway, I'd like to go way back now.
To a 90s kid like me, there was a time when Jim Carrey could do no wrong. With his rubber-faced insanity, endless catchphrases, and slapstick comedy that defied human anatomy, he was a total cartoon character come to life and a comedic force of nature that defined the decade. But as a kid, his family faced dire financial and emotional hardships, which only further fueled his natural passion for making people laugh. His energetic stand-up routine was noticed by Rodney Dangerfield, who invited Carrey to tour with him as an opening act. Soon after, he moved to Hollywood, where he became a hit on the nightclub circuit, and by the age of 21, he had made his first Tonight Show appearance. After starring in the short-lived NBC sitcom The Duck Factory in 1984, he went on to appear in movies like Once Bitten, Peggy Sue Got Married, and Earth Girls Are Easy. But his career really began to take off with the success of the early 90s sketch comedy show In Living Color, where he was a standout among an already insanely talented and hilarious cast, spouting off dead-on celebrity impressions and creating unforgettable original characters.
Don't worry, folks. I'm a fire marshal.
In 1994 alone, Carrey hit the box office jackpot with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, all huge comedy hits, and to those of a certain age, instant classics. In 1995, he turned in an off-the-wall performance as the Riddler opposite Val Kilmer's Dark Knight in the year's biggest blockbuster, Batman Forever, then returned as everyone's favorite pet detective in Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Jim Carrey was now a global superstar, churning out one massive hit after another. When it was announced that his next film would be The Cable Guy, the hype for the movie became completely engulfed by the reports that Carrey was set to earn a record-breaking $20 million paycheck, which at the time was the highest upfront salary for a lead actor. And with this story elevating the public's already high expectations for Jim Carrey's next movie, an eventual critical backlash was practically inevitable.
I was very excited to be doing a Jim Carrey movie. I had no idea. I just knew it was called The Cable Guy and that Jim was getting a lot of money.
Because I have some more original questions. Okay. Do you think you're worth the $20 million? Yes. And then some.
My name is Ben Stiller, and I guess you're wondering who I am and why I have my own show.
As Jim Carrey's star was rising on In Living Color, actor and comedian Ben Stiller had created The Ben Stiller Show, which started in 1989 as a 13-episode experimental sketch show for MTV and then later got revamped when it moved to Fox in 1992.
Fox Network called me up. They want me to do a show for them.
But Ben, you do a show for MTV.
So what?
So you can't work for two networks, Ben. That's not ethical.
Jeff, this is Fox. No videos. Lots more money.
The Ben Stiller Show garnered critical praise, but the ratings were so poor, it was canceled after only 12 episodes aired. Among the show's writers was Judd Apatow, who had also co-produced Jim Carrey's 1991 landmark stand-up special, Jim Carrey's A Natural Act. Following his show's cancellation, Ben Stiller directed and co-starred in the acclaimed comedic drama Reality Bites with Ethan Hawke and Winona Ryder, while Judd Apatow wrote for TV shows like The Critic and The Larry Sanders Show. LA prosecutor turned screenwriter Lou Holtz Jr. originally wrote The Cable Guy as a more light-hearted, annoying buddy comedy akin to 1991's What About Bob with Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. Director Ben Stiller and producer Judd Apatow liked the script, but wanted it to have more of an edge. After screenwriter Lou Holtz left the project and Jim Carrey came aboard, Apatow took the script and wrote in much darker elements, to the point where the studio got nervous and pulled in the reins a bit. Stiller and Apatow visited Carrey on the set of Ace Ventura 2 to brainstorm ideas for Carrey's dark and unhinged character, and found inspiration in popular stalker thrillers like Fatal Attraction, Single White Female, Play Misty for Me, and Cape Fear, among others. As The Cable Guy took shape, it was looking like this wasn't going to be your typical family-friendly Jim Carrey comedy.
Would you say feel-good hit of the summer?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
also a taut thriller.
Well, it's Hitchcock meets Jerry Lewis. Or actually, Rosemary's Baby meets The Odd Couple.
Jim Carrey, Matthew Broderick, The Cable Guy.
Likely doing the most harm to The Cable Guy was its own marketing campaign, which promoted it as yet another Jim Carrey comedy blockbuster. Mix that with Carrey's good guy on-screen reputation and his highly publicized $20 million payout, and you're now touting The Cable Guy as something it wasn't. Safe. Instead, it's a pitch-black satire heavily inspired by and even spoofing the stalker thriller genre that was popular at the time. Also, it's actually Matthew Broderick's story where Jim Carrey is just the constant disruptor. Broderick plays Stephen Kovacs, who moves into a new place after getting dumped by his girlfriend Robin, played by Leslie Mann in an early role, and he needs his cable hooked up. Enter eccentric cable installer Chip Douglas, who not only does a thorough job, but also throws in all the premium movie channels for free in exchange for a guy's night out. Chip quickly becomes fixated on Steven and begins to completely invade his life, privacy, and relationships. Hilarious. The Cable Guy's sinister humor and creepy premise didn't make it the easiest Jim Carrey movie to enjoy as a kid, but I do remember liking it, just not as much as his other stuff. And I loved everything he did back then, even his excessive Frank Gorshin-inspired Riddler in Batman Forever. Again, I was the perfect age. His Riddler was silly but still had this hint of darkness that was like a warm-up for something like The Cable Guy, which is not unlike Punch Drunk Love, where we got an uncomfortable look at the notion of your typical Adam Sandler man-child character existing in the real world. Likewise, Chip Douglas is a very Jim Carrey character, but this is a more grounded world than Ace Ventura or The Mask, and under all the usual Carrey-isms, is an overbearing, disturbed, and lonely shell of a man who grew up neglected and was raised on nothing but television. Even his name Chip Douglas is a My Three Sons reference.
I think one of the things that Jim finds funny is confidence. If you look at his characters, a lot of them are really cocky. Ace Ventura is the most confident guy in the world, and in the end, he pulls it off. The Mask is about a guy who finds his confidence and finds that part of himself. Even the Riddler is like a psychotic, confident guy. And the Cable Guy is a guy who is so insecure and has no self-esteem and makes up for it by the fact that he acts incredibly confident, but you can see in his eyes that he knows he's a complete loser.
Jim Carrey was on top of the world, so a subversive movie like The Cable Guy was a pretty gutsy career move at the time, paycheck aside. But in retrospect, it ended up being a fitting transition from the screwball comedies that put him on the map to his acclaimed dramatic roles in The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Released in the summer of 1996, The Cable Guy was not a flop, despite popular belief. It actually more than doubled its $47 million budget at the global box office, but even that much of a profit was still considered by many as a failure for a Jim Carrey movie, given how high that bar was back then. It was likely the overall polarized reception from critics and audiences that made the movie a bit of a punchline for a while.
And there's that awful script from The Cable Guy.
Let me see. Stupid script! Nearly wrecked Jim Carrey's career! You God! I'm gonna get... What?
Well, Jim Carrey's career was not wrecked, since he followed up The Cable Guy with the 1997 hit Liar Liar, a much safer and more typical Jim Carrey comedy that certainly won back a lot of his fans. Director Ben Stiller focused more on his acting career, starring in huge comedy hits like There's Something About Mary, Meet the Parents, and Dodgeball, but still occasionally directed films that poked fun at show business, like Zoolander and Tropic Thunder. Producer and co-writer Judd Apatow went from The Cable Guy back to TV for a while, where he created the short-lived but beloved shows Freaks and Geeks and Undeclared, which would plant the seeds for a whole new generation of comedy heavy hitters. He produced the hit Will Ferrell comedies Anchorman, Talladega Nights, and Step Brothers, and has become a major director in his own right with The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and Funny People. It was while doing The Cable Guy where Apatow first met Leslie Mann during her audition, and the two have been married since 1997. And since then, Mann, along with their daughters Maud and Iris, have appeared in a number of Apatow's film and TV projects. So here we have the 15th anniversary Blu-ray edition of The Cable Guy. And, well, I hate to say it, but it's apparently out of print, so it looks like I'm going to have to bring back a new segment I originally introduced a couple episodes ago. This 2011 Blu-ray release got a surprisingly generous amount of bonus material, which certainly blows the original, but still available bare-bones DVD right out of the water. The centerpiece of the special features was a newly recorded commentary track that reunited comedy giants Ben Stiller, Judd Apatow, and Jim Carrey as they spend the film's runtime hilariously reminiscing over the ups and downs of the production. Also included are over 6 minutes worth of outtakes and nearly 25 minutes worth of deleted and extended scenes. Next up are 2 cable specials that originally ran in the summer of '96 to promote the film, the HBO First Look presented by director Ben Stiller, and Comedy Central's Canned Ham hosted by producer Judd Apatow. Additionally, we get 17 minutes worth of behind-the-scenes rehearsal footage, a brief camera test of Jim Carrey fully decked out to shoot the film's infamous nightmare sequence, and 3 minutes worth of actress Leslie Mann auditioning for her part while reading lines with future husband Judd Apatow just off-screen. Lastly, we get a music video for the track Leave Me Alone by Alice in Chains frontman Jerry Cantrell, and the film's original theatrical trailer. It's a great release. Shame you can't get it anymore. Oh well.
Don't sweat off my sack.
The Cable Guy is a film I've grown to appreciate a lot more over the years, be it for its subversive humor, its prescient look at the internet, its attempts at some social commentary, and its self-aware meta-humor that even predated the release of Wes Craven's Scream by a few months. It also hangs its hat on awkward, cringe-inducing comedy that wouldn't really become more mainstream until after the turn of the century. And throw in a barrage of early appearances from a bunch of now famous actors and comedians, and you have a movie that I think is worth a fresh rewatch. However, it is far from being my favorite 90s Jim Carrey movie. It's got some tonal issues, and I think the abrupt conclusion ends the film on a bit of a whimper, but it's still a fun and crazy cat and mouse game that you should seek out any way you can. The 2011 Blu-ray and its abundance of special features would have been the ideal way to fully appreciate it, if it were still available, that is, so I'll give The Cable Guy a 3 out of 5 recommendation.
Enjoy the flick.
The Cable Guy is certainly of the 90s with all the dated references, technical jargon, and alt-rock heavy soundtrack, but in many ways it was also ahead of its time. And because it went against the grain of what your typical Jim Carrey comedy was like back then, I think it felt a lot darker then than it does now. Not surprisingly, Jim Carrey is giving it everything he's got, and while he was definitely laughing all the way to the bank, he's never phoning it in. His out-of-control, if somewhat overwhelming presence is also perfectly counterbalanced by Matthew Broderick as the awkward and soft-spoken everyman. So, give The Cable Guy another try. You may just be pleasantly surprised.
By the way, you might want to put on a bathing suit, because you'll be channel surfing in no time.